Greetings and welcome to GamEntropy, where we ask the question of what makes a game tick. So, we have to our sides old Devil May Cry, that's old with an E, and new Devil May Cry, that's also with an E. Clearly, same title, more or less. Not the same game, though. What's going on here?
Devil May Cry is one of many series that has been subjected to a recent reboot. And while time was, rebooting a series used to be reserved for updating gameplay concepts and bringing it into the modern era, it has increasingly taken on a new meaning and has become less about updating ideas and more about reconfiguring the plot itself.
Which is really interesting, if you care about the plot. Which I do.
For the sake of analogies, the Devil May Cry tetralogy could be compared to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films. Both had final entries that had been financially successful yet committed functionally questionable, very questionable, directional decisions. Devil May Cry's last numbered installment was certainly a good game, but the decision to shift the focus to a new protagonist, in the form of white-haired Dante clone Nero, along with nearly half the game placing back in Dante's shoes, retreading half the terrain that Nero had just tread, seemed to suggest that the designers had no clue whether the structure of Devil May Cry needed to stay back or move forward in a new direction. It is possible that some of this creative conduct was influenced or affected by the unwelcome reception to Metal Gear Solid 2's Raiden. Now, say what you will about Raiden, but at least you could readily tell him and Snake apart.
But we're not here to talk about Devil May Cry 4, or Metal Gear Solid 2, or Devil May Metal Gear Solid Cry 2 Fourths. We're here to talk about the new Devil May Cry. DmC. Or as I like to call it, DmC.
And since it's been out for a couple months now, we'll be talking about juicy plot details for this and previous entries in the series. Except Devil May Cry 2. No one loves Devil May Cry 2. DmC is a reboot of the Devil May Cry saga, taking the characters and ideas of the original story and casting them in a new light, while remaining true to the basic ideas of their original roles. Whether the series needed a reboot is the first matter to be approached. As stated earlier, a reboot these days is more often the result of muddled or outright unapproachable continuity, and is handled delicately, with only token mythology nods.
Lord of the Lycans.
What's left behind is often an increasingly cluttered storyline, where it's not unthinkable that established canon was routinely either bent or broken to justify new plots or new developments.
But I mean, come on. Something like Castlevania needed dozens of titles before it got a fresh start. Devil May Cry couldn't have done it in 4 games, right? Right?
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
Yeah, when you actually look at it, Devil May Cry was a bit of a mess from square one. Pushing aside the silly melodrama and cheesy one-liners the game is known for, many of the ideas it establishes either lock out or severely restricts potential future stories. Let's take Virgil, Dante's brother. Although technically introduced in the original Devil May Cry, Virgil is effectively a non-character since he's mute and under the control of Mundus, the real adversary in the game. It's only upon defeating Virgil that we learn who he really is, but we glean nothing of his true personality or his relationship to Dante. Because of this, we don't really get to meet Virgil until Devil May Cry 3, a game which itself functions as a prequel to the series. Yet, even here he's placed on a limited track, since his demise in the original game is already confirmed and the events of Dante's awakening make sure to tie up those loose ends nicely. Likewise, Dante's father Sparda is not so much a character as a legacy figure, whose accomplishments and failures alike serve at best as shaky pretense to create new problems for Dante to solve.
The original Devil May Cry games certainly closed their fair share of doors. What about the ones they left open?
Well, on the upside, the first game established Dante's partnership with the sexy female lead Trish, since, you know, all that betrayals she committed near the end, water under the bridge. Yet, subsequent entries chose instead to rely on sort of a Bond girl approach, swapping in new femme fatales and making Dante's adventures more episodic than deliberate in nature. Since Dante's ties to the people around him have remained ephemeral, there's been little need for him to grow or change, as the only time his past allies returned was in a game where he wasn't the main character. The actual character of Dante, as a result, has hardly enjoyed any consistent ties with anyone. We've been given a character who we're told is cool, but whose potential for growth has always been limited because he's generally portrayed as being alone.
But what about that new, dark-haired Dante? The one who replaced the light-haired version we'd previously seen and gotten attached to. The one who comes off as being, well, kind of a douchebag.
So, for what it's worth, DmC reestablishes Dante himself, along with his brother Virgil, and their family nemesis Mundus in a new light, giving all the characters new and more complex motivations. Dante's brother wasn't properly introduced until Devil May Cry 3, and being Dante's twin brother who conforms to horrid cliches, pretty much had to be everything Dante wasn't. Ergo, where Dante is brash and unrestrained, Virgil must be disciplined and emotionless.
I swear, you are the most undisciplined fighter I've ever known.
Shut your damn mouth.
And the only one I wasn't able to kill.
The new Virgil does play as an opposite to Dante, but in less obvious ways. The two are as much the product of different lives as they are different personalities. While Dante lived a hard life, Virgil grew up in privilege and good fortune, which, to a point, informs why Dante has an unkempt and rebellious streak to counter Virgil's constrained chessmaster persona. What sets the new Virgil apart from his original counterpart are his motivations, which are, functionally, clearer. Virgil in the original saga was driven only by his lust for power, and a desire to connect with his demonic heritage, but there was no real purpose or passion beyond that. It was unclear what Virgil would do, if anything, upon accomplishing his goal. And, since Virgil was destined to be enslaved and die at the hand of his father's nemesis in the original game, any pretense to answer that question was conveniently ducked away from. New Virgil's motivations for world domination may be paper-thin, as world domination often is, but his attitude about it is at least uncommon and refreshing.
Mankind would be free. Yes. Free from the demons. The path is clear for us to rule. What did you just say? The path is clear for us to rule. To rule what? This. Everything.
What makes the character work is the fact that he has an inherent love for his brother based purely on their connection, the way he idealizes it, and the way he believes that ideal to be betrayed when Dante stands against him.
The world is under my protection now.
You've chosen the wrong side. You're not human, Dante. You never will be.
The downloadable episode carries this further still, exploring Virgil as a character who views himself as being the wronged party, betrayed by a brother whom he opened himself up to.
Welcome to hell, brother.
I don't have a brother anymore.
Cute. You know, I was the one running away, living in the slums. You enjoyed a comfortable life. Look who's on top now.
I remember a shadow, living in the shade of your greatness. I remember you tossing me into an abyss, I who was and should be king.
So you take the world I love as recompense for your imagined slights.
In contrast to Virgil's budding antagonist, we have DmC's active antagonist, Mundus. Based on the villain of the original game, Mundus was once a statuesque foe who brilliantly decided, on the eve of his resurrection, to call forth the one person who might effectively be able to kill him.
Brilliant Mundus. Truly inspired.
He was generic, arch, and prone to killing henchmen who failed him at the drop of a hat.
Which is why evil will always have the edge. You good guys are always so bound by the rules. You see, I killed my own men.
The new Mundus is, to his credit, a more effective foe, conveying a sinister calm in his insidiousness. He uses modern crises and has virtually conquered the world on the outset of the plot, not through violent conquest, but insidious control. Yet Mundus is not an unflappable foe, and the actions of Dante and Virgil get him severely unhinged, sending him into a rage and exposing a human side of what is fundamentally an inhuman foe, presenting an antagonist both depraved, yet equally well-rounded.
The Nephilim. It fights.
Meanwhile, the new canon establishes that Dante's father Sparta is still alive, although simply out of the picture. In doing so, the designers have left room to pull him back into the plot later on. And this brings us to the last familiar-ish face, our plucky protagonist, Dante. While the new Virgil at least resembles the old, and the new Munda still has a familiar motif, new Dante only generously resembles the classic. Unless you do this. But it doesn't really count. Trying to pin down the new Dante is a little more difficult, as the character's development is a little less clear.
What makes you think I give a shit?
On the outset, Dante is a jerk, vaguely an anarchist, and doesn't seem to care about anything. Until about an hour later, when he finds out where he came from. At which point, he suddenly does care.
I want to know more. Where we come from, what happened to us. And above all, I want to know who's responsible for all this.
Much of Dante's development, choppy though it is shown through Kat, the game's token girl sidekick who is, nonetheless, one of the stronger original elements to this story. Nevertheless, Dante's personality makes such a stark transition from who he was established to be in the beginning that one wonders why the developers committed to making him that way in the first place when he was just going to change within an hour of gameplay. Much of the game's attitude, and Dante's through it, can be read from the visual style, which tends to aspire as much towards the grotesque as possible. As such, while a succubus-type creature in the original games might look like this, a creature called a succubus in the new game looks more like this. This ugly world design approach, in turn, is reflected in Dante, who comes off as a darker and edgier take on the original character. Unfortunately, darker and edgier is usually just a cheap excuse to get characters yelling profanities every chance they get.
You don't look a day over 12,000.
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Fuck you!
Fuck you anyway!
So the C in DmC stands for classy, right?
While Dante's original character was meant to be a crazy wild man who laughs in the face of danger and only gets serious when things are truly dire, the new Dante is kind of a dick half the time. Much of this is a product of his previously discussed darker and edgier persona, but the upside to his portrayal is that when he finds something to stand behind, he has a more definitive stance and purpose to take, and a real role to play in things to come. Let's look at what the original Dante did. He ran a shop, office, some sort of business. What did it do? Sometimes the phone rings. He answers that phone, then becomes disappointed because whomever called him didn't know a password which indicates demonic activity that requires his services. How this business works is never really explained. At all. What is this password and how do people find out about it? Do the people that call also pay him to kill things? Is he independently wealthy and running this operation out of pocket?
Am I correct?
New Dante lives in a trailer. Alright, so I'm somehow even more vague on how he makes money, but we get a feel he's not living the high life. He's just living his life and making ends meet. Of course, with regards to adapting the original mythos, Dunk still has room to grow. We've yet to see a counterpart to the original game's Trish, And hopefully, when we do, her character will make more sense than being an agent of an awakening god who sent her as bait to lure the one person who could kill him before he was at full power. The new Devil May Cry does also make good use of the new ideas and elements it introduces. In particular is the Raptor News Network, a propaganda news source in the game's universe, which seems intended to hearken to the worst elements of Fox News, though it is so extreme that it is better compared to the totalitarian propaganda of the British television network from V for Vendetta. And, likewise, it is quite welcome to see a return from the wall writing from Splinter Cell Conviction, even if it wants to kill you now. DmC has plenty of room to grow as a game, as it's already functionally streamlined a multiple weapon system, as well as the grab and pull gameplay mechanics that started in Devil May Cry 4. There is a strong sense, however, that new Devil May Cry does not entirely care for some of the classic mechanics, particularly the Devil Trigger. While the previous titles refilled the player's meter quickly and rewarded them for using their power often, the new DmC routinely brings players in on a zeroed-out meter which grows slowly and ineffectually.
Nonetheless, I dare say I would welcome our new Devil May Cry Overlord, as the numerous imperfections in the original game's narratives do show them to be a beloved but deeply imperfect work.
There is still room for improvement, but it may even be the intent of the developers to allow their crude, boorish Dante to grow into one that the longtime series fans have come to love and respect. What they really need to do to make this work, though, is give us more of a Dante we can care about, even if he is removed from the original, and less of one that looks like the product of someone who would do this. And record it. And put it into a mass-produced AAA video game.
Because this? Not classy. Not at all. I kind of feel like a dick doing this.